2:14 a.m. I remember the exact time because I checked my watch twice, just to make sure I wasn't misreading it through the sleet. The driveway was covered in a thin layer of fresh snow, the kind that crunches under your boots and soaks through the seams if you stand still too long. The porch lights were on. The house looked exactly the same as it had 11 months ago, warm, quiet, untouched. I stood there in my army-issued coat, a duffel bag still slung over my shoulder, watching my younger sister throw my life into a snowbank. Clara didn't even hesitate. She dragged one of my sealed military duffels across the porch, swung it once and let it drop. It hit the ground with a dull thud, snow kicking up around it. Then came a cardboard box, old taped labeled in my handwriting from years ago. Childhood things, photos, books I hadn't touched since high school. She tossed that one harder. The box split open on impact. I didn't say anything. I had just gotten back into the country less than 8 hours ago. No announcement, no warning. I landed, cleared processing, signed off on my temporary leave, and drove straight here from the airport in a rental Jeep that still smelled like plastic. I didn't call ahead. I wanted to see things as they were. Now I was. Clara stood on the porch in a cream-colored cashmere wrap that probably cost more than my monthly base pay. Her hair was done, nails perfect, like she was expecting company, not throwing her sister's belongings into freezing weather in the middle of the night. She saw me watching. She smiled. Not a warm smile, not even a fake one. It was the kind of smile people wear when they think they're getting away with something obvious. "Oh," she said, like she'd just remembered I existed. "You're back." I adjusted my grip on the strap of my duffel and stepped forward, boots crunching on the ice. Clearly, she shrugged like my return was a minor inconvenience. "I needed the storage room," she said. "You've been gone for almost a year. I figured you weren't coming back anytime soon." I glanced past her into the house. The lights were on in the living room, no movement. No one else came to the door. "Where are Mom and Dad?" "Sleep," she said. "It's 2 a.m. Normal people sleep." I let that sit for a second. Then I looked back at the snowbank where my things were piling up. Military duffels, footlockers, boxes with my name on them. Some still sealed from deployment. Others pulled from wherever they'd been stored and thrown out like trash. "You couldn't wait until morning," she laughed under her breath. "I have a bridal fitting at 10, she said. The designer needed the full space. Lighting, mirrors, the whole setup. That room is perfect for it. Of course it was. Clara had always been good at finding perfect things, as long as someone else paid for them. "You turned my storage room into a fitting suite." "It's not your room," she said quickly. "It's part of the house. And you don't even use it. I've been deployed." "Exactly," she said. Like that proved her point. Another box came flying past her shoulder, this one heavier. It landed closer to me, sliding slightly on the snow before stopping. I didn't flinch. She folded her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "You're not seriously upset about this, are you?" she asked. "I mean, come on, you're a grunt. You live out of bags anyway. It's not like you need space." There it was, the word she liked to use. The label that made everything she did feel justified. I looked at her. Really looked. Same house, same porch, same dynamic. Nothing had changed. Clara Dalton's self-proclaimed luxury event planner. Social media polished. High-end contacts. Expensive tastes. Zero financial independence. Robert and Sylvia Dalton's favorite child. And me, Warrant Officer Elise Dalton, U.S. Army Cyber Intelligence Analyst. Deployed 11 months overseas, tracking financial networks tied to international fraud operations. Invisible, predictable, convenient. I walked past her without another word and stepped into the snowbank. The cold hit immediately through my gloves as I grabbed the first duffel and dragged it upright. Snow clung to the fabric. The zipper was still sealed the way I'd packed it months ago. At least something hadn't been tampered with. Behind me, Clara let out a small, amused breath. "Wow," she said. No speech. No dramatic reaction. I expected more. I ignored her. One bag at a time, I started moving my things into a rough line closer to the driveway. Organizing, assessing, prioritizing what needed to be kept dry. It was automatic. You don't survive in my line of work by reacting emotionally. You assess the situation. You stabilize what you can. You deal with the rest later. A metal footlocker caught my attention. It had been one of the last things she threw. The impact had knocked it partially open. The lock was still attached, but the latch had bent just enough to create a gap. That wasn't ideal. I set my duffel down and crouched in the snow, brushing off the top layer of ice. The metal was freezing under my fingers as I pulled it fully open. Inside was a mix of deployment gear and personal storage, exactly how I'd left it. Except for one thing, a stack of mail. I paused. That wasn't where I kept documents. I picked up the top envelope. It was already damp around the edges from the cold, but the print was still clear. Commercial banking letterhead. Addressed to Clara's LLC, but sent to this house. I flipped it over, opened it. The paper inside was crisp, official, structured in the kind of format I'd seen 100 times before in fraud cases. Line of credit approval, amount $350,000. My eyes moved down the page. Borrower authorization, signature on file. My signature, perfect. Not similar, not rushed, not an obvious fake. Perfect. Every curve, every angle, exactly the way I signed official documents. I didn't feel a spike of anger, didn't feel shock. What I felt was something quieter. Clarity. Behind me, Clara was still talking. Something about timelines, about how I should just be flexible for once, about how this was temporary and I was overthinking it. I tuned it out. Instead, I reached back into the footlocker and pulled out the rest of the stack. More letters, more notices. Different dates, same pattern, same signature. My name attached to financial instruments I had never authorized. I exhaled slowly, watching the air fog in front of me. The sleet was picking up again, tapping lightly against the metal edges of the locker. I stood up holding the document in my hand. Clara finally noticed I'd gone quiet. What she asked, a slight edge creeping into her voice. "What are you looking at?" I turned the paper slightly, just enough to catch the porch light. Not enough for her to read. Enough for me to see it clearly. Every detail, every mistake, every piece of evidence. I didn't scream at my sister for throwing my life into the snow. I simply stared at the forged ink on that document, realizing she hadn't just discarded my belongings. She had just handed me a written confession to a federal felony. Have you ever had someone treat your silence like weakness, only to realize too late that you were just paying attention? If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, comment below and subscribe. Because this is where the story stops being quiet. I folded the document once, slid it back into the envelope, and placed the entire stack into my duffel, like it was just another piece of gear. Then I went back to work. No confrontation, no questions, no raised voice. I moved everything. One bag at a time, I loaded the Jeep. The metal footlocker went in last. It was heavier now, not physically, but in terms of what it represented. Evidence has weight when you understand what it can do. Clara stayed on the porch watching me like this was some kind of silent protest. "You're seriously leaving?" she asked. I didn't answer. She let out a short laugh. "Wow. Okay, that's dramatic even for you. Still nothing from me." I shut the trunk, wiped my hands on my jacket, and got into the driver's seat. The engine turned over immediately. The heater kicked in a few seconds later, pushing out air that was still cold. I didn't look back when I pulled out of the driveway. I didn't need to. I already knew exactly what was behind me. The motel was off the interstate, 15 minutes away. The kind of place people don't ask questions. The kind of place that rents rooms by the night without requiring much more than a card and an ID. The neon sign flickered. Half the letters were out. Perfect. I parked under a broken light and carried only what I needed inside my laptop. One duffel and the envelope. The room smelled like stale air and cleaning chemicals. The carpet was worn. The desk was scratched. The Wi-Fi password was taped to the wall next to a lamp that leaned slightly to the left. Functional. That's all I needed. I locked the door, checked the windows, and set my laptop on the desk. Then I sat down. The shift happened automatically. Emotion off, process on. I connected to the network, ran a quick scan, and routed my connection through a secure tunnel I'd used overseas. Old habit. You don't assume a network is safe just because it's domestic. Then I opened my personal financial dashboard. First step, credit reports. All 3 bureaus. Pulled in under 30 seconds. I scanned for anomalies. There it was. A commercial line of credit opened 6 months ago. $350,000 limit. Borrower, Clara Dalton, LLC. Authorized signatory, Elise Dalton. My name, my credit profile, my authorization. Except I never authorized it. I leaned back slightly, letting the information settle into place. 6 months ago, I was deployed. Limited access to personal accounts, communications filtered, financial monitoring minimal unless something triggered an alert. They timed it well. Not smart enough to avoid detection, just smart enough to delay it. I opened the detailed report. Payment history active. Balance fluctuating. Usage pattern aggressive. This wasn't a dormant line of credit. It was being used constantly. I pulled the transaction logs, line by line, date, amount, merchant. The first large charge stood out. $78,000, luxury auto leasing company. I didn't need to guess. Clara's Mercedes. Next, $42,000, event venue deposit. Non-refundable, high-end location, of course. Then another, $19,500, designer boutique, bridal related, followed by a series of smaller transactions that added up quickly. Floral deposits, catering retainers, interior staging services. It wasn't a business, it was a lifestyle, funded under my name. I kept scrolling. Then the pattern shifted. Different type of transaction, brokerage account transfers, irregular amounts, $25,000, $10,000, $15,000, all routed to a personal trading platform. Robert. I opened a new tab and pulled public records tied to the account. Same address. Same timeline. He'd been using the credit line as a liquidity source for day trading. High-risk positions, short-term holds, frequent losses. I checked the current balance. They had already burned through a significant portion of the $350,000. Not all of it, but enough to make recovery complicated. I exhaled slowly, no panic, no anger, just a clear assessment. 2 actors, coordinated access, one motive maintain an image, the other chase losses, both using my identity as a shield. I went deeper. Access logs. Most people don't realize how much metadata financial systems retain. Login timestamps, IP addresses, device signatures. I pulled everything available. Clara's login pattern was predictable. Late morning, early afternoon, consistent IP, tied to the house network. Robert's was erratic. Early pre-market hours, late night sessions, multiple devices. Neither of them used any meaningful obfuscation. No VPN, no proxy, just direct access, confident, careless. I cross-referenced timestamps with my deployment schedule. Every unauthorized action aligned perfectly with periods where I had zero visibility. They didn't just use my identity, they relied on my absence. I opened the scanned copy of the authorization form attached to the credit line. There it was again, my signature, perfect replication, which meant one of 2 things. Either they had access to a high-quality sample and practiced until they got it right, or they used a digital reproduction method and applied it across documents. I zoomed in, pixel edges were clean, ink flow consistent. This wasn't scanned and pasted. This was physically signed, practiced, repeated, deliberate. I closed the file, then reopened the transaction dashboard and filtered for pending activity. That's when I saw it. Scheduled transfer, status pending execution. Amount $85,000. Date tomorrow. Time 8 a.m. Destination high-end catering and floral services vendor. I clicked into the details. This wasn't a tentative hold. This was a confirmed outgoing wire. Pre-authorized. Locked into the system. Final processing window at exactly 8 a.m. I checked the current time. 2:58 a.m., just over 5 hours. Enough time. More than enough. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk, and looked at the screen. Everything I needed was there, documented, time-stamped, traceable. They had built an entire financial structure on the assumption that I would either never notice or choose not to act. That assumption was their first mistake. The second was leaving a complete paper trail. I reached for my phone and placed it face down next to the laptop. No calls, no messages. Not yet. This wasn't the stage for conversation. This was preparation. I opened a new document and began outlining the sequence. Credit bureau flags, identity theft affidavit, bank fraud department escalation, legal counsel. Everything had to be timed precisely, because once that $85,000 wire executed, it would complicate recovery and expand the damage. Stopping it wasn't enough. I needed to lock everything down, completely. I saved the file, closed the laptop halfway, and sat back in the chair. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the heater. Outside, a truck passed on the interstate, its headlights cutting briefly through the thin gap in the curtains. I looked at the envelope again, then at my hands. Steady, no hesitation. They thought putting my boxes in the snow would make me disappear quietly into the night. They didn't know that giving an intelligence officer a paper trail is like handing a sniper the exact coordinates of your bunker. My phone started vibrating on the desk at 6:30 a.m. I let it ring twice before I picked it up. The screen showed my father's name. I answered without saying anything. There was a brief pause on the other end, like he expected me to speak first. When I didn't, he adjusted. Elise, his voice was controlled, too controlled. That told me everything I needed to know. He knew. Morning, I said. Neutral, flat, no emotion to work with. Another pause. Then my mother's voice came through in the background, sharp and urgent. Put me on, she said. Let me talk to her. There was a muffled shift. And then Sylvia Dalton took over the call like she always did when things weren't going her way. Elise, she said, her tone already loaded with practiced concern. We need to talk about what you think you saw last night. Think, not what you saw. Not what happened. They were already setting the frame. I leaned back in the chair and glanced at the laptop. The screen was still open, transaction logs frozen mid-scroll. I saw enough, I said. A quick inhale on her end, then the pivot. Your sister is under a lot of stress with the wedding, she said. You know how much pressure she's been under? These vendors, these expectations, it's not simple. I didn't respond. She kept going. We are family, Elise. Family shares resources. That line of credit, it's a bridge. A temporary solution. You're making it sound like something it's not. Bridge loan. Interesting choice of words. I reached for the cup of coffee I'd picked up from the motel lobby an hour earlier. It was black, burnt. Exactly what I needed. I didn't authorize it, I said. Silence. Then a soft laugh, not amused, dismissive. You're being dramatic, she said. It's paperwork. Your father handled it. Everything is under control. Everything is under control. I let that sit for a second. Then I spoke again. My signature is on a $350,000 commercial credit line. I didn't sign, I said. That's not paperwork. That's fraud. The word landed. You could hear it in the shift of her breathing, but she didn't back off. She doubled down. Don't use that word, she snapped. Do you have any idea what that implies? You're accusing your own family. I didn't correct her. I didn't need to, because she had just said it out loud. Accusing your own family. Not denying the act. Just reframing the accusation as the problem. That's how this worked. Always had. Robert came back on the line. Enough, he said. We don't have time for this. Direct, efficient, moving to the objective. Good. I preferred that. There's a compliance review this morning, he continued. Routine check. The bank flagged the account for standard verification. It happens with large commercial lines. I didn't interrupt. They're going to send a validation request, he said. All you need to do is log in and confirm authorization. Digital signature. Takes 2 minutes. I looked at the timestamp on the pending wire transfer. 8 a.m. Then at the system note attached to the account. Compliance flag pending verification. He wasn't lying about the process, just about the context. And if I don't, I asked. Another pause, this one shorter, more calculated. Then the account gets frozen, he said. The transaction gets flagged. It becomes a problem. A problem. That was one way to describe it. For who, I asked. For everyone, he said. Your sister loses her vendors, deposits get locked, contracts get breached. You create a situation that spirals quickly. I took another sip of coffee. Still hot, still bad, still useful. You already created the situation, I said. No, he said sharper now. We managed it. You're the one escalating it. There it was, the inversion. They act. I react. I become the problem. Classic. The validation request will come through by 7:30, he said. You need to complete it by 7:45. That's the cutoff before the system locks for processing. I checked the time. 6:42 a.m. Plenty of room. You log in. He continued, confirm the authorization, and this goes away. Clean, simple, no issues. No issues. Except for the part where it's a federal offense. I didn't say that out loud. Not yet. And if I don't sign it, I asked again. This time he didn't pause. This time he went straight to it. Then I call your commanding officer. The room felt smaller for a second. Not because of the threat, because of how predictable it was. You've been gone 11 months, he said. High-stress environment, classified work. It wouldn't be hard to raise concerns about your mental state. I didn't move, didn't speak. He kept going. I tell them you're unstable, that you're showing signs of severe PTSD, paranoia, delusional accusations against your own family. He chose his words carefully. each one designed to hit a specific vulnerability. Military clearance isn't just about performance, it's about trust, stability, perception. You think they'll ignore that, he asked. You think they won't open a review? Pull your access, suspend your clearance while they investigate. He let that hang, then finished it. Your career disappears overnight. Silence filled the room. Not heavy, not emotional, just space. I picked up the coffee again and took a slow sip. Then I set it back down. I understand, I said. He didn't respond immediately. He was waiting for resistance, for argument, for something he could push against. I didn't give it to him. I'll take care of the paperwork, I added. Another pause, longer this time, then a shift, relief, subtle. But there. Good, he said. That's the smart decision. Of course it was, from his perspective. We'll send the login details if you need them, he continued. Just get it done before 7:45. I will, I said. Sylvia's voice came back in softer now. That's all we needed, she said. We knew you'd come around. You always do, I didn't respond. Because that part was true. Historically, consistently, predictably, until now. Drive safe, she added, and try to get some rest. You look exhausted. I almost smiled at that. Almost. The call ended a second later. The screen went dark. The room went quiet again. I sat there for a few seconds, looking at nothing in particular. Then I reached over and opened the laptop fully. The transaction was still there. $85,000. Scheduled, waiting. I pulled up the compliance documentation tied to the account. Validation waiver. Digital confirmation required. Timestamp window 7:30 to 7:45 a.m. Exactly as he said. Everything lined up. Which meant they weren't improvising. They had done this before. Maybe not at this scale. But enough to be comfortable. Enough to believe it would work again. I opened a new tab. Then another. Legal frameworks. Reporting channels. Federal Trade Commission identity theft. Affidavit. Commercial banking fraud escalation protocols. I wasn't rushing, I was aligning. Every step had to be precise, because once I moved there was no partial outcome. It would either hold, or it would collapse everything tied to it. I glanced at the clock. 6:58 a.m. 47 minutes. Enough time to prepare, not enough time to waste. I reached for my phone, unlocked it, and scrolled to a number I had saved but never used. A civilian contact, specialized, efficient. The kind of person you call when you don't want negotiation, you want resolution. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second. Then I pressed call. My father hung up, entirely convinced he had bullied the invisible daughter into submission one last time. He forgot that in the military, a tactical retreat is just the required setup for an absolute ambush. My thumb hovered for half a second, then I completed the call. He picked up on the second ring. Dalton, direct. No greeting, no wasted time. Warrant Officer Elise Dalton, I said. I need immediate counsel on a live financial fraud situation involving identity theft and a pending commercial wire. A pause. Short, measured, time sensitivity, he asked. 70 minutes to execution, I said. Wire scheduled for 8 a.m., 85,000. Federally insured bank. Multi-party access. Forged authorization under my identity. Another pause. Longer this time. Then a shift in tone. Send me everything, he said. Now. I didn't ask for credentials. I didn't ask for background. I had already vetted him hours earlier when I saw the first document. He was exactly what I needed. I transferred the files, credit reports, transaction logs, signature scans, access records. Within 2 minutes, he was back on the line. This is clean, he said. Clean in the worst possible way. They didn't even try to hide it. I know, you want containment or escalation. Both, I said, in that order. Another pause. Then I heard it. A faint shift in his voice. Approval. Good answer, he said. Open your laptop. We're doing this live. At 7:12 a.m., we were on a secured video call. He appeared on screen in a dark office, already dressed. Already working. No small talk. No introductions beyond what was necessary. Listen carefully, he said. We're initiating what I call an absolute freeze protocol. It's not a formal term, but it's accurate. I didn't interrupt. We're going to do 3 things simultaneously, he continued. 1, file a formal identity theft affidavit with the Federal Trade Commission. 2, flag the credit line across all 3 bureaus. 3. Contact the bank's fraud division directly and trigger a compliance escalation before that wire clears. He leaned forward slightly. Timing is everything, he said. We need to hit them before 8 a.m. If we do this right, that transfer doesn't just fail, it becomes evidence. Understood. He shared his screen. Forms appeared. Fields populated. Name, social security number, address, incident description. I filled in what was mine. He filled in what was strategic. Be precise, he said. No emotional language, just facts. I typed. Unauthorized use of identity. Forged signature. Commercial line of credit opened without consent. Funds used for non-business personal expenditures. Multiple actors with verified access logs. He nodded as he read. Good, submit. I clicked. Timestamp 7:24 a.m. Next, he said. Credit bureaus. We moved fast. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. Fraud alerts activated. Extended monitoring requested. Documentation attached. Each submission created a digital footprint. Each footprint tightened the net. Now the bank, he said. This part mattered most. He dialed. Not a public number, not customer service. Direct line to the commercial fraud division. A woman answered. Professional, alert. He identified himself. Gave a case summary. Referenced the affidavit ID we had just generated. There was a pause on her end. Then a shift. Hold, she said. We waited. I watched the clock. 7:31 a.m. The validation window had opened. My phone buzzed once on the desk. I didn't look at it. Stay with me, he said quietly. I am. The line clicked. A new voice came on, male, older, authority in the tone. This is Senior Fraud Investigator Harris, he said. I understand we have a potential identity theft case tied to a commercial line. My attorney didn't waste time. He laid it out, clear, structured, verifiable. Cross-state activity, forged authorization, active wire pending, federal jurisdiction triggered due to insured status. I listened. No need to add anything. Everything that mattered was already in motion. Another pause, longer this time. Then Investigator Harris spoke again. We're placing an immediate hold on the account, he said. Stand by. I watched the transaction dashboard on my screen. The pending wire was still there. $85,000. Status scheduled. 7:36 a.m. My phone buzzed again. Then it didn't stop. I flipped it over. Incoming calls. Clara, then Sylvia, then Robert. Back to Clara. I muted it. On the screen, nothing changed. Not yet. Then status update. Pending to review hold. I didn't move. Didn't react. Just watched. Investigator Harris came back on the line. We've escalated this to a level 1 fraud investigation, he said. All associated accounts are being flagged. No outgoing transfers will process until this is resolved. That includes the scheduled wire my attorney asked. Correct. Good, he said. I exhaled once. Not relief, confirmation. But it wasn't over. Given the amount and the documentation provided, Harris continued, this is being referred for potential criminal review. We're initiating a full asset freeze on all accounts linked to the LLC and any cosigners pending investigation. Cosigners. Robert. There it was. The second layer. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to, because I understood exactly what that meant. Not just the $85,000. Everything. Checking accounts, brokerage accounts, credit lines. All of it. Locked. Is there anything further you need from us at this time, my attorney asked. Not at the moment, Harris said. We'll be in contact. The line disconnected. The room went quiet again. 7:42 a.m. 3 minutes left in the validation window. My phone lit up again. Robert. I let it ring. Then go to voicemail. I didn't need to hear what he had to say. I already knew. 7:45 a.m. The window closed. No signature. No validation. No compliance. Just a frozen system and a growing investigation. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the screen. Everything was still, controlled, contained. Then at 8:14 a.m. the final confirmation came through. Account status frozen. All linked assets restricted. Wire transfer canceled. Investigation status active. I read it once, then again. Not because I didn't understand it, because I wanted to be sure every detail matched what we had set in motion. It did. My phone exploded. Not buzzed, not rang, exploded. Notifications stacked on top of each other. Missed calls, voicemails, messages. I unlocked it. 47 missed calls, most from Clara. The rest split between Sylvia and Robert. New messages came in as I watched. Text from Clara. Why is my card declined? Another, what did you do? Another, call me right now. A voicemail notification followed. Then another, I didn't open them. Didn't need to, because I could already see it. The florist. Card declined. The caterer. Transaction failed. The bridal boutique. Payment rejected. Every vendor, every deposit, every carefully staged piece of her perfect wedding collapsing in real time. I set the phone down, face up this time. Let it light up, let it ring, let it record everything. Across the room, the heater clicked as it cycled off. The silence that followed was clean, precise, controlled. Downstairs in their pristine house, I knew my mother was dropping her coffee cup as the realization set in. It was a beautiful performance of panic, but the true masterpiece of their destruction hadn't even started yet. I let the phone keep lighting up until the battery warning flashed at 10%. Then I plugged it in and turned the sound back on, not because I wanted to engage, because I wanted a record. The first voicemail I opened was from my mother. Timestamp 8:19 a.m. Her voice came through sharp, uneven, already breaking. Elise, what did you do? She demanded. My card just got declined at the grocery store. Your father can't access his account. Clara is at the florist and they're refusing to release anything. You need to fix this, right now. A pause. Then the tone shifted, softer, controlled, reframed. I don't know what kind of episode you're having, but this is not okay. You're hurting your own family. Call me back. The message ended. I didn't respond. I opened the next one. Clara. No greeting, just volume. What the hell did you do? She snapped. Do you have any idea what's happening right now? My payment got rejected in front of everyone. They're treating me like I'm some kind of fraud. Fix it. Now. Another voicemail followed immediately, then another, each one louder, less controlled. By the fourth message, the narrative had started to shift. You're jealous, she said. That's what this is. You've always been jealous. You come back out of nowhere and try to ruin everything because you can't stand that I actually have a life. I paused the playback. Not because I needed a break, because that line mattered. Narrative construction. They were moving from panic to positioning. I opened the message thread instead of the voicemails. Clara had switched to text. I just talked to Julian. That was new. He's confused. I told him what's really going on. I kept reading. I told him you've been unstable since you got back. That you've been acting paranoid. That you hacked into our accounts because you're obsessed with controlling everything. I didn't react. Didn't feel the need to defend. Because this wasn't about truth. It was about speed. Whoever defined the story first controlled the perception. And Clara had just made her move. I set the phone down and turned back to the laptop. My attorney was already online, camera on, waiting. You see the messages? He asked. I see them. He nodded once. They're panicking, he said. That's expected. Clara is already pushing a narrative, I said. Mental instability, jealousy, accusation of hacking. He didn't look surprised. Standard play, he said. Discredit the complainant. Shift the focus from the crime to the credibility of the person reporting it. He leaned back slightly. It won't hold, I know. Because facts don't rely on perception. They rely on documentation, and I had that. Any contact from the bank? I asked. Not yet, he said, but they will. This kind of freeze triggers internal reviews fast. I nodded. Then my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Clara. Unknown number, local, I answered. Warrant Officer Dalton, I said. A man's voice came through, polished, artificially calm. Ms. Dalton, this is Andrew Kessler. I represent Robert Dalton. Of course he did. I'm calling regarding a very serious misunderstanding involving a financial account, he continued. My client informs me that you've initiated a fraud claim that is causing significant damage. Misunderstanding, damage. Carefully chosen words. I'm listening, I said. My client is requesting that you immediately withdraw the complaint and contact the bank to reverse any holds placed on the account, he said. This can be resolved privately if you act quickly. I glanced at my attorney on the screen. He was already shaking his head slightly. Resolved how I asked. There was no intent to defraud, Kessler said. This was a family arrangement, a shared financial resource. You are listed as an authorized party. That authorization is forged, I said. A brief pause. Then he pivoted. Regardless, escalating this to a federal level is unnecessary, he said. If you continue down this path, my client is prepared to pursue legal action for damages. There it was, The threat? Predictable? Vague. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Send it in writing." Another pause. Shorter this time. "Of course," he said. "You'll receive a formal notice shortly." The call ended. I set the phone down and looked at the screen. My attorney exhaled once, almost like a laugh. "That was fast," he said. "Cheap," I added. He nodded. "Very," he said. "Local counsel, low tier. He's fishing. For what?" "For you to panic," he said. "For you to back down before this gets any bigger." I leaned back. He threatened legal action. My attorney smiled, not amused, satisfied. "That's the best part," he said, "if he puts that in writing. He's doing our job for us. Explain." He leaned forward slightly. "You've filed a verified identity theft affidavit tied to a federally insured financial institution," he said. "The bank has already frozen the assets and initiated an investigation." I nodded. He continued. "If their lawyer sends a written demand that you withdraw the claim, knowing there's documented fraud, that's not a threat," he said. "That's a record. A record of what? Of them acknowledging the situation and trying to suppress it," he said. "In some cases, that edges into obstruction. At minimum, it reinforces intent." My phone buzzed again. Email notification. Sender Andrew Kessler. That didn't take long. I opened it. Formal letterhead. Structured language. Demand for immediate withdrawal of the fraud claim. Assertion that the matter is a private family financial arrangement. Warning of potential civil action if I fail to comply. I read it once, then forwarded it to my attorney. He opened it on his end, read it, then leaned back and let out a quiet laugh. "That's impressive," he said. "In what way?" "In the way a written confession is impressive," he said. "He just documented their entire position in a way that helps us." I didn't smile, but I understood. "They're not thinking long-term," I said. "They're not thinking at all," he replied. "They're reacting. That was the difference. I had time. They didn't." My phone lit up again. Another message from Clara. "He's asking questions," she wrote. "Julian's parents are asking why the payments failed." I didn't respond. Another message came in seconds later. "I told them you hacked us," she said. "I told them you've been unstable since deployment, so don't make this worse. Fix it." I stared at the screen for a second, then locked the phone. No response, no correction, because she had just done exactly what I needed. She took a contained situation and expanded it into a social one. She introduced new variables, new witnesses, new consequences, and most importantly, new people who would soon need answers. Real answers. They thought they could hide their felonies behind wedding invitations and country club gossip. So I decided it was time to introduce their high society in-laws to the brutal, unedited truth. I closed the email, powered down the laptop, and opened the duffel I'd kept separate from the rest. Inside was my dress uniform, pressed, protected, exactly the way I maintain it between formal obligations. I laid each piece out on the motel bed. Jacket, trousers, shirt, insignia, ribbons, everything had its place, and everything went on in a specific order. No hesitation, no second guessing. By 9:12 a.m. I was standing in front of the mirror. Clean lines, no wrinkles, no loose threads. Rank visible, identity clear. People don't argue with what they recognize as authority. They adjust to it. That was the point. I picked up the blue binder from the desk. It wasn't random. Every page inside it had been selected, printed, and organized in a way that told a story without needing explanation. Timeline first, then the credit reports, then the authorization forms with my forged signature, then the transaction logs, then the IP access records, and finally the FTC affidavit and bank freeze confirmation. Everything in order, everything verifiable, everything undeniable. I closed it, slid it under my arm, and walked out. The country club was 20 minutes away. Private property, gated entrance, controlled access. I pulled up to the front drive at 9:41 a.m. Valet approached immediately. He saw the uniform before he saw my face. That mattered. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, stepping back slightly. I handed him the keys. "Private event," I said. "Dalton." "Julian's engagement brunch." He nodded. No questions, no hesitation. Authority doesn't always need explanation. It just needs confidence. I stepped out of the vehicle, adjusted the cuff of my jacket, and walked toward the entrance. The lobby was quiet. Polished floors, controlled lighting, staff moving efficiently without drawing attention to themselves. A hostess stood behind a podium near the main dining area. She looked up as I approached. Her eyes paused on the uniform. Then her posture shifted. "Good morning," she said. "How can I assist you?" "Private dining room," I said. "Engagement brunch, Dalton party." She checked the list. Her finger moved down the page. Then she nodded. "Yes, of course," she said. "Right this way." I didn't follow her. I stepped past her. "I know where it is," I said. She didn't stop me. The hallway leading to the private dining room was lined with framed photos and muted lighting. Soft voices carried from behind the closed doors. Laughter, glassware, controlled curated conversation. I reached the door and didn't hesitate. I opened it. The room inside was exactly what I expected. Long table, white linen, crystal glassware, carefully arranged seating, Julian at the head, his father beside him, Clara to the right, Robert and Sylvia across from them. Everything positioned for presentation, for impression, for control. That control ended the second I stepped inside. Conversation stopped, not gradually, immediately. Every head turned. Not to Clara, not to Robert. To me, uniforms do that. They shift focus without effort. I walked in without breaking stride. No rush, no hesitation, just forward movement. Clara was the first to react. She stood up too quickly, her chair scraping against the floor. "What are you doing here?" she hissed under her breath as she moved toward me. I didn't stop. "Get out," she whispered, her voice tight. "Right now, before security gets called." I kept walking. She stepped closer, trying to block my path. "This is not the place for whatever episode you're having," she said. "You've done enough damage already." I looked at her once, just once. No anger, no reaction. Then I stepped around her. She wasn't an obstacle. She just thought she was. Behind her, Robert had gone pale, not shocked, recognizing. He understood exactly what was happening. Sylvia looked like she was about to stand, then stopped herself halfway. Julian didn't move. He just watched, trying to process, trying to understand why a uniform had just walked into his controlled environment. I reached the table, stopped at the head, directly across from Julian. His father looked up at me, measuring. Not intimidated, not yet, but alert. "Can I help you?" he asked. Professional tone, used to being in control. I set the blue binder on the table, centered, deliberate. The sound it made against the linen was quiet. But in that room, it carried. "I believe you can," I said. Julian glanced at Clara, then back at me. "This is a private event," he said. "If you have business." "This is business," I said. Clear, direct, no escalation, just fact. Clara stepped forward again. "Don't listen to her," she said quickly. "She's not well. She's been—" I didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her, because she wasn't the audience. Julian's father was, and he knew it. He reached for the binder, paused for half a second, then opened it. Glasses came out, set on his face. First page, timeline. His eyes moved slowly, deliberately. Second page, credit report. Third, authorization form. He stopped there, looked closer, then turned the page. Transaction logs, amounts, dates, patterns. The room stayed silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Clara's breathing was audible now, short, uneven. "Julian," she said, her voice tight. "She's lying. She manipulated those documents." "She, Clara," he said quietly. Just her name, nothing else. But it was enough. She stopped, because his tone had changed. He wasn't defending. He was assessing. Robert shifted in his seat. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "Those documents are being taken out of context." Julian's father raised a hand. Not aggressive, just final. Robert stopped talking. He turned another page. "FTC affidavit, bank freeze confirmation. Official language. Official timestamps, official consequences." His jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, in recognition. Because this wasn't social anymore. This wasn't reputation management. This was legal exposure, real, immediate, unavoidable. I stood there without speaking. No need to explain. No need to argue. Everything that mattered was already in front of him. Clara took a step back, then another. Her hand knocked into her glass. Crystal hit the table, tilted, spilled. Orange liquid spread across the white linen. No one reacted. No one looked at it. Because something far more expensive was breaking. My sister gasped. knocking over her crystal mimosa glass as Julian's father put on his reading glasses. The silence that followed was the sound of a carefully curated, decades-long illusion shattering into a million pieces. I stayed where I was and let him keep reading. Julian's father didn't rush. He turned each page like he was reviewing a contract that could cost him more than money. IP logs, device IDs, timestamps. The kind of detail that doesn't care about anyone's feelings. He stopped on a page with signature comparisons, side by side. My verified signature from military records, and the one used on the credit authorization. He leaned in slightly, close enough to see the pressure points in the ink, close enough to understand this wasn't a casual mistake. This was practiced, repeated, intentional. He flipped to the next page. Practice sheets, multiple attempts, variations, each one getting closer to the original. The room didn't move, didn't breathe. Clara took a step forward. "Those are fake," she said quickly. "She made those. She's been planning this. She's obsessed with making me look bad. Stop," Julian said. Not loud, not aggressive, just final. She stopped, because something in his voice had shifted. He wasn't defending her anymore. He was distancing. Robert tried to recover control. "This is completely out of context," he said. "We had an arrangement. Elise agreed to. I didn't," I said. Calm, direct, no emotion. Then I looked at Julian's father, not at Clara, not at Robert, at the person who needed the truth in a format he respected. "You are about to marry into a family currently under federal investigation for a $350,000 wire fraud," I said. No raised voice, no emphasis, just a statement. Clean, verifiable, unavoidable. Julian didn't look at me. He looked at Clara, really looked this time. Not at the version she presented, at what was in front of him. Her posture, her breathing, the way she was already trying to reposition herself. "It's not like that," she said quickly. "You know me. You know I wouldn't. I know what I'm looking at," he said. His tone wasn't angry. That would have been easier. It was controlled, measured, disappointed, which was worse. She stepped closer, reached for his arm. He didn't pull away immediately, but he didn't move toward her either. That hesitation said everything. "Julian." "She's lying," Clara said. "She hacked into our accounts. She's been unstable since she got back. My parents can explain. My parents can explain." That was her fallback. Always had been. Robert opened his mouth, started to speak. But Julian's father spoke first. "Don't," he said. One word. Flat. Robert stopped, because he recognized the tone. This wasn't a negotiation. This was evaluation. Julian's father closed the binder halfway and looked at Robert. "Is any of this inaccurate?" he asked. Simple question. No room for spin. Robert hesitated. "Just long enough." That was the answer. Sylvia stepped in. "Of course it's inaccurate," she said quickly. "This is being blown out of proportion. It's a family matter." "It's not," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to, because every document on that table had already said it for me. Julian looked down at the binder, then at Clara, then at his hand, the one with the ring. There was a moment, small, quiet, but final. He slid the ring off his finger. No speech, no announcement, just a clean motion. He placed it on top of the binder, right over the page with the forged signature. Then he stood up. Clara stared at him, like she was waiting for the rest of it. The explanation, the correction, the part where he told her it would be fine. It didn't come. "Julian," she said, "don't do this here. We can talk about this privately. This is just..." He didn't respond. He didn't look at her again. He walked past her, past the table, past the room, and out the door. No hesitation. No second glance. Just gone. The silence that followed was different. Not controlled, not composed, broken. Clara stood there for a second, then turned. Too fast, too late. "You just ruined everything," she said to me. Not shouted, said, like a statement, like I had taken something from her. I didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. She had built everything she was talking about on something that wasn't hers. Robert finally snapped. "This is unbelievable," he said, his voice rising. "You walk in here, you stage this." He didn't finish, because the doors opened. Not gently, not quietly, deliberate. Heavy wood against metal hinges. Every head turned again. This time it wasn't me. Two men stepped in, dark suits, professional posture, no hesitation. Behind them, 2 uniformed local officers, positioned, observing, controlled. The first man stepped forward. "Robert Dalton," he asked. Robert froze, just for a second, then recovered. "Yes," he said. "Who are you?" The man reached into his jacket and produced identification, held it up. "Senior Investigator Harris," he said. "Commercial Fraud Division." Robert's expression shifted, not confusion, recognition. Then the second name. Clara Dalton. She didn't respond immediately, because she already knew. "I'm going to need you both to come with us," Harris said. "We have some questions regarding a commercial banking fraud investigation." Clara laughed, short, sharp, almost hysterical. "This is insane," she said. "You can't just walk in here and—" "We can," Harris said. Same tone, same control, no escalation, just fact. Sylvia stood up abruptly. "This is a mistake," she said. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding." "Our attorney has already contacted us," Harris said. That stopped her, completely, because now she understood. This wasn't developing. This had already developed. The officer stepped forward. Not aggressively, just enough to make it clear this wasn't optional. Robert tried one last time. "This is a civil matter," he said. "There's no basis for—" "There is," Harris said. "And you can explain your position at the station." Clara looked at me, really looked this time, no smirk. No control, just realization. "You did this," she said. I met her gaze, didn't deny it, didn't confirm it, because the truth was already in motion. They stepped forward, hands guided, wrist positioned, procedure, clean, professional. Clara didn't fight. Robert didn't either. Because at that point, resistance doesn't help. It just adds to the record. Sylvia started crying, not controlled, not measured, real. But too late to matter. The room watched. Every guest, every observer, every person who had been part of the curated image. Now seeing the unedited version, watching the removal, the correction, the end, watching the police escort my sister out in handcuffs. With my mother sobbing in the ruins of their country club reputation, I didn't feel a rush of vindictive joy. What I felt was the incredibly heavy, clean silence of a lifelong illusion finally breaking apart. I watched the patrol cars pull away until the road was empty again. Then I left. No conversations, no explanations, no attempt to manage what was already done. 6 months is enough time for noise to settle. It's also enough time for consequences to finalize. The wedding never happened. That part unraveled fast. Vendors don't wait when payments fail, and reputations don't survive public investigations. Julian's family issued a short, controlled statement about irreconcilable differences. Clean, distant, final. Clara's situation took longer. Federal cases don't move quickly, but they move precisely. The charges were reduced in exchange for cooperation. No prison time. But that doesn't mean no consequences. She's on federal probation, strict conditions, financial monitoring, travel restrictions, and restitution. Every dollar tied to that credit line is now a debt she carries legally. $350,000 doesn't disappear just because the lifestyle it funded did. It gets itemized, tracked, collected, over time. Robert didn't fare better. His trading accounts were already unstable. Once the investigation froze everything, whatever liquidity he had left collapsed. Margin calls don't care about personal circumstances. The bank moved quickly after that. Foreclosure is a process, but it's not a forgiving one. The house, the one with the porch, the lights, the curated image was taken back and liquidated to cover part of the outstanding balance. Not all of it, just enough to reduce the damage. Sylvia stayed with him, not out of loyalty, out of lack of options. They moved into a short-term rental first, then something smaller, then something quieter. People adjust when they have to, even the ones who spent years avoiding it. I didn't follow the details closely. I didn't need to, because none of it required my involvement anymore. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, handwritten, forwarded through my base mailing address. No return label, just my name. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Sylvia's, consistent, careful, controlled. I set it on the table and finished what I was doing before I opened it. No urgency, no curiosity, just sequence. When I finally sat down, I opened it cleanly along the edge. The paper inside was folded twice. Standard, predictable. I read it once. No pauses, no reactions. "Elise, we know things have been difficult. We've had time to reflect on everything that's happened, and we want you to know that we forgive you. Family goes through challenges, and sometimes people make mistakes under pressure. Your sister is trying her best to rebuild, but the financial burden is overwhelming. Your father and I are doing what we can, but we're struggling to secure stable housing. We're asking as your parents if you could help us with a small loan, just enough to get us through the next few months while we get back on our feet. At the end of the day, family is all that matters. We hope you can find it in your heart to do the right thing. Love, Mom. I read it again, slower this time, not because I needed clarity, because I wanted to confirm the structure. It followed the same pattern it always had. Reframe, minimize, redirect, request. Things have been difficult, passive, no ownership. We forgive you, inversion. They position themselves as the ones granting resolution. People make mistakes under pressure, generalization, no acknowledgement of specific actions. Your sister is trying her best. Deflection. Focus shifts to her effort, not her behavior. We're struggling. Emotional leverage. Designed to create obligation. Family is all that matters. Final anchor. The phrase that was always used to close the loop, to justify everything that came before it. I set the letter down, looked at it for a few seconds, then I picked it up and tore it in half. Once, then again, clean edges, no hesitation. I dropped the pieces into the trash. No ceremony, no second thought. Because there was nothing left in that message that required analysis. I had already done that work. Months ago, standing in the snow, looking at a forged signature, understanding exactly what I was dealing with. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about stress. It wasn't even about the wedding. It was about a system. A structure where family only existed as a tool. Used when they needed access. Used when they needed compliance. Never used for protection. Never used for accountability. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the street. Quiet neighborhood, no noise, no pressure, no expectations attached to my presence. Just space. That's what boundaries create, not distance, clarity. I sat back down and looked directly ahead. If you're listening to this, understand something. What happened here wasn't unique. The scale might be different, the details might change, but the structure is common. Conditional relationships built on access, not respect. You're valuable as long as you provide something: time, money, silence, compliance. And the moment you stop providing it, the narrative shifts. You become difficult, selfish, unstable. The problem, that's not an accident. It's a system working exactly as designed. So here's the part that matters. Pay attention to your financial identity, your credit, your accounts, your access points. Not because you're paranoid, because you're responsible. No one else will protect that for you. And when something doesn't add up, don't ignore it to keep the peace. Peace built on denial isn't peace, it's delay. Second, understand this clearly. Setting a boundary is not cruelty. It's not abandonment, it's not betrayal, it's definition. It tells people exactly where you end and they begin. And the ones who benefited from you having no boundaries will always react the loudest when you finally set one. That reaction is not a signal to back down. It's confirmation you're doing it right. Real family doesn't require you to sacrifice your stability to maintain their comfort. Real family doesn't forge your name to fund their lifestyle. Real family doesn't threaten your career to protect their lies. Real family respects the line, or they lose access to it. I didn't lose a family, I corrected a system. And once that system was gone, what was left was simple: silence, space, control. At 2 a.m., my sister dumped my belongings in the snow because she thought my silence was weakness. She learned the hard way that when you try to bury someone in the cold, you only teach them how to survive the freeze. If you are standing in the dark right now, being asked to set yourself on fire to keep toxic people warm, remember this: the word no is a complete sentence. Use it and watch how quickly your real life begins. I didn't walk away from that situation thinking about revenge. I walked away thinking about structure. Because what happened to me didn't start that night in the snow. It didn't even start with the forged signature. It started years earlier with a pattern that nobody ever questioned, including me. There's always a system behind behavior like that. In my case, the system was simple. I was the reliable one. Clara was the one who needed support. That dynamic sounds harmless when you say it out loud. It even sounds responsible. But over time, it changes shape. Responsibility turns into expectation. Expectation turns into obligation. and obligation turns into silent access. That's the part most people miss. No one sat me down and said, "We're going to use you." It didn't look like that. It looked like small requests, small assumptions, small decisions made without asking me because I was predictable. And predictable people are easy to manage. That's not an insult. It's a reality. If people know you won't push back, they stop asking. If they know you'll tolerate something, they expand it. And if you don't interrupt the pattern early, it becomes the system. That's what I was dealing with. Not a single bad decision. A structure that had been running for years without resistance. The biggest mistake I made wasn't trusting my family. It was assuming that silence was neutral. It's not. Silence gets interpreted. And most of the time, it gets interpreted as agreement. I thought I was being disciplined, focused, low drama. I stayed out of conflicts. I handled my responsibilities. I didn't engage in unnecessary arguments. From my perspective, that was control. From theirs, it was permission. That's how financial abuse actually starts. Not with a large number, not with a criminal plan. It starts small. Access to your information, a shared document, a copied signature, a temporary solution, something that feels manageable in the moment, something that doesn't seem worth pushing back on, because it's easier to let it go than to deal with the conversation. And that's where the system locks in. Because once you allow it, once it becomes easier to justify the second time, then the third, until eventually you're no longer being asked at all. You're just being used. Most people don't notice it happening because nothing feels illegal at the beginning. It feels like family. It feels like helping. It feels like being flexible. That's why it works. By the time it becomes something serious, the pattern is already established. The access is already there, and the assumption is already built in. They won't say anything. That assumption was their first mistake, but it was also my responsibility to correct it. And that correction didn't start when I found the documents. It started when I decided not to ignore them. That's the real turning point in situations like this, not discovery, decision. A lot of people find problems. Very few people act on them, because acting creates conflict. And most people are trained to avoid conflict, especially inside a family. But here's the reality. Avoiding conflict doesn't remove the problem. It protects it. Every time you choose comfort over clarity, the system gets stronger. Every time you delay a boundary, the cost increases. By the time I opened that footlocker, the situation was already built. All I did was recognize it. And then I made a choice most people don't make. I didn't negotiate with it. I didn't soften it. I didn't reframe it to make it easier to accept. I called it exactly what it was: fraud. And once you define something accurately, your options become clear. You either act or you accept it. There's no middle ground that actually works. That's another mistake people make. They think they can manage the situation without fully addressing it. They try to handle it quietly. They try to keep the peace. They try to fix something without exposing it. That doesn't work, because systems like this depend on being hidden. The moment you bring them into the open, they collapse. That's why the reaction was so immediate. That's why the panic was so loud. Because the system wasn't designed to survive exposure. It was designed to survive silence. There's one more piece people don't talk about enough. Evidence. Emotion doesn't win situations like this. Evidence does. If I had walked into that house and started arguing, nothing would have changed. They would have denied everything, minimized it, reframed it, turned it back on me. But documentation doesn't argue. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't get emotional. It just exists. That's why I focused on structure instead of reaction. Because structure is what holds up under pressure. Emotion isn't. And here's the part that matters most. If you don't define your boundaries, someone else will. And they will always define them in a way that benefits them, not you. That's not personal. That's human behavior. People operate based on what they're allowed to do. So if you never say no, you train them to expect yes. And once that expectation is set, breaking, it feels like betrayal to them. Even when it's just correction. That's what happened in my case. They didn't see themselves as doing something wrong. They saw me as disrupting something that had always worked for them. That's the difference. And once you understand that, the situation becomes a lot clearer. It's not about emotions. It's not about fairness. It's about structure and whether or not you're willing to change it. Because if you're not, it will keep running. Exactly the way it always has. Until it costs you more than you're willing to lose. I didn't need a $350,000 problem to learn this. I just needed to stop ignoring smaller ones. Most people watching this aren't dealing with federal fraud. You're dealing with something quieter. It looks normal on the surface. It even sounds reasonable when it's explained to you. That's why it's hard to see. It might be a family member asking to use your credit just for a few months. It might be someone expecting you to cover a bill because you're more stable. It might be a situation where you feel pressure to say yes even when your instinct says no. Those aren't random moments. They're early signals. And most people dismiss them. Not because they don't see them, but because they don't want to deal with what happens next. Because saying no creates tension. And tension feels uncomfortable. So you choose the easier option. You say yes. You delay the conversation. You tell yourself it's temporary. But temporary patterns have a way of becoming permanent when no one interrupts them. That's how systems like this grow. Not through force, through repetition. One of the most important things I learned is that discomfort is data. If something feels off, it usually is. Not always illegal, not always extreme, but misaligned. And that misalignment doesn't fix itself. You either address it early or you deal with it later at a higher cost. That's not a theory, that's a pattern. Let's make this practical. Start with your financial identity. Most people don't treat it seriously enough. Your credit profile isn't just a number, it's access. It determines what you can do when you can do it and how expensive it will be. If someone else has access to that, even partially, you're exposed. So check it. Regularly, not once a year, not when something feels wrong, consistently. Pull your credit reports. Look at what's open. Look at what's been requested. If you see something you don't recognize, don't assume it's nothing. Verify it immediately. Next, control access. That means more than just passwords. It means being intentional about what you share and who you share it with. Family doesn't automatically get access. That assumption is where most problems start. You can trust someone and still set limits. Those two things are not opposites. They're supposed to exist together. If someone reacts negatively to a reasonable boundary, that tells you more than their words ever will. Now let's talk about language. Because this is where most people get pulled back into situations they already know are wrong. You've heard the phrases, "you're overreacting." It's not a big deal. We're family. Those aren't explanations. They're shortcuts. They're designed to bypass your logic and go straight to your emotions. If you respond emotionally, you lose clarity. And once you lose clarity, you start negotiating with something you already know isn't right. So don't negotiate. Simplify, short answers, clear decisions, no extra explanation. No, I'm not comfortable with that. That's enough. You don't need to justify it. You don't need to soften it. You don't need to make it easier for the other person to accept. Because your goal isn't to make them comfortable. It's to make your position clear. That's a shift most people struggle with. You're not responsible for how someone reacts to a boundary. You're responsible for setting it. That's it. Another thing people misunderstand is the difference between helping and enabling. Helping has structure. There's a plan, a limit, a timeline, accountability. Enabling doesn't have any of that. It's open-ended, it's vague. It relies on trust without verification. If someone can't explain how they're going to resolve a situation and they expect you to carry the weight indefinitely, that's not help. That's dependency. And dependency grows, it doesn't stabilize. Now let's talk about backlash, because it's going to happen. When you change your behavior, the system reacts. People who benefited from your previous pattern will push back. They'll question you, label you, try to reframe your decision as a problem. That's not because you're wrong, it's because the system is adjusting. And systems don't adjust quietly, they resist. That resistance is not a signal to stop. It's confirmation that something needed to change. If everything stays comfortable after you set a boundary, it probably wasn't a real boundary. The real ones create friction. That's how you know they matter. One more thing. You don't need to win the argument. That's where people get stuck. They try to prove their point. They try to get agreement. They try to be understood. You don't need any of that. You need consistency. Say no. Repeat it if necessary. Then disengage. Because once you've made your position clear, continuing the conversation usually just pulls you back into negotiation. And negotiation is exactly what got you there in the first place. The goal isn't to convince the other person. The goal is to change your own behavior. That's where control comes from. And once your behavior changes, everything connected to it starts to shift. Not immediately, not comfortably, but reliably. Your life gets simpler the moment you stop trying to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. That's not harsh, it's efficient. And once you see it clearly, it becomes very difficult to go back to pretending you don't. I didn't gain anything from that situation by getting louder. I gained control by getting precise. That's the difference most people miss. They think power comes from reacting fast, saying the right thing in the moment, or pushing back emotionally. It doesn't. Reaction feels strong, but it's usually unstructured. And unstructured responses are easy to redirect, manipulate, or dismiss. Strategy is different. Strategy is delayed. It's intentional. It's built on understanding exactly what you're dealing with before you move. When I saw that document in the snow, I didn't act immediately. I assessed. I verified. I built a position that couldn't be argued with because it wasn't based on how I felt. It was based on what I could prove. That's control, not over other people, over your own decisions. And that's where most people lose it. They give up control the moment they let someone else define the situation. If someone tells you that you're overreacting and you adjust your behavior to match that, you've already handed over control. If someone labels you as selfish for setting a boundary and you back down to avoid that label, you've handed over control again. Control doesn't disappear all at once. It gets transferred in small decisions, repeated over time, until you don't recognize the pattern anymore. That's why identity matters, not in the abstract sense, in the functional sense. Your name, your signature, your credit, your decisions. Those are assets. They have real-world impact. And if you don't treat them that way, someone else will. Not because they're evil, because they're opportunistic. There's a difference. Most people don't set out to become the person who exploits someone else. They adjust to what's available. If access is easy, they use it. If boundaries are unclear, they test them. And if nothing stops them, the behavior continues. That's not a character flaw. That's a pattern. And patterns don't change until something interrupts them. That interruption is what most people avoid, because it feels uncomfortable. Setting a boundary isn't natural if you've spent years not having one. It feels abrupt. It feels harsh. It feels like you're doing something wrong. You're not. You're doing something unfamiliar. And unfamiliar actions always feel wrong at first. That doesn't mean they are. It just means you haven't done them enough for them to feel normal. Here's something else that matters. The louder the reaction, the more necessary the boundary. That's not a theory. It's a reliable indicator. If someone responds to a reasonable limit with anger, guilt, or pressure, it means that limit affects them more than they expected. And that usually means they were benefiting from the absence of it. So when that reaction comes, and it will, you don't interpret it as a problem. You interpret it as confirmation. Another thing people struggle with is guilt. Not real guilt. Conditioned guilt. The kind that shows up when you go against a pattern that's been reinforced over time. You feel like you're doing something wrong even when you're correcting something that is wrong. That's not your intuition. That's conditioning. You've been trained to associate compliance with being a good person, so when you stop complying, it feels like you're stepping outside of that role. But here's the question you need to ask yourself. Who benefits from you believing that? If the answer is someone else, then that guilt isn't serving you. It's controlling you. You don't remove that overnight, but you can start questioning it. Every time it shows up, instead of reacting to it, analyze it. Where is it coming from? What is it trying to get you to do? And is that action actually in your best interest? If it's not, you don't follow it. You let it exist without acting on it. That's how you break it, slowly, consistently, without making it dramatic. Now let's talk about peace. Most people think peace is something you find. It's not, it's something you build. And you don't build it by adding more. You build it by removing what doesn't belong. Unclear expectations, uncontrolled access, unresolved patterns. Once those are gone, what's left is simpler, quieter, more stable. That's what I felt sitting in that room reading that letter. Not anger, not relief, nothing. And that wasn't a lack of emotion. It was the absence of confusion. I understood exactly what I was looking at. And once you understand something clearly, it loses its ability to pull you back in. That's the goal. Not to feel better, to see clearly. Because once you see clearly, your decisions become easier. You don't hesitate as much. You don't second-guess yourself as much. You don't negotiate with things you already understand. You act. Or you walk away. Both are valid. Both are controlled. If you want something practical to take from this, keep it simple. Identify the pattern. Stop the access. Accept the backlash. Maintain the boundary. That's it. Most people stop at step 3. They feel the pressure, the discomfort, the pushback, and they reverse the decision to make it stop. And when they do that, the pattern resets. Nothing changes. If you want change, you have to hold the line long enough for the system to adjust. That doesn't take strength. It takes consistency. You don't need a situation like mine to apply this. You already know where it applies. There's something in your life right now that doesn't feel right. Something you've been tolerating because it's easier than addressing it. Something you've explained away more than once. That's where this starts, not with a confrontation, with a decision. A clear one. And once you make it, everything else follows. At 2 a.m., my sister dumped my belongings in the snow because she thought my silence was weakness. She learned the hard way that when you try to bury someone in the cold, you only teach them how to survive. 5. The freeze. If you're standing in the dark, right now, being asked to set yourself on fire to keep toxic people warm, remember this. The word no is a complete sentence. Use it, and if you want more stories that give you real tools, not just drama, subscribe to the channel.